On April 11th, 1986, 14 special agents assigned to the Miami-Dade field office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation met early in the morning to conduct mobile surveillance for two very armed and dangerous men that had committed bank robberies, murder, and attempted murder in the Miami area. Special Agent Ben Grogan and Special Agent Jerry Dove were able to locate the vehicle that these suspects were in that had been stolen in the prior days, and they were able to get behind this vehicle, radio to their other buddies, the other agents in the area, and they made the determination to attempt a traffic stop which ended in a crash. Those 4 minutes in the aftermath and investigation that followed changed the way that firearms training was conducted for law enforcement and civilians alike. My name is Alex Green, this is my YouTube channel, and I'm going to start a series where I'm honoring fallen law enforcement officers that have gave their life or gave serious injury protecting the public, and what lessons did we learn from their incident? What did they get right? What did they get wrong? How can we meet those in the middle and present to you guys on how to make your firearms training better and how the same situation doesn't happen to other civilians and other law enforcement. Before we get too deep in this video, I do want to honor the two fallen special agents and the other agents that were involved that day. There were two agents killed in the line of duty that day. They were Special Agent Benjamin Grogan and Special Agent Jerry Dove. Also involved that day in this incident were Special Agent Edmundo Morales, which he is credited with one of the major changes in law enforcement and civilian firearms training. I'll get into that just in a second. Special Agent John Hanlon, Special Agent Gilbert Orienta, Special Agent Ron Reisner, Supervisory Special Agent Gordon McNeil, and Special Agent Richard Manizui. There had been several other FBI involved shootings with suspects in the past, but the difference with this shooting is the amount of documentation that come from it. You had 6 FBI agents that survived the shooting. So you had FBI investigation going on. You had the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office and the Miami City Police Department going on at the same time. You had 3 well-respected investigative agencies doing research on top of autopsy results from the 2 deceased suspects and the 2 deceased FBI agents, along with the injuries sustained to the FBI agents. All this information was put together, and basically they were like, this was not good, this was very good. Now, how do we change so this doesn't happen? The documentation is really what makes this incident so astonishing, is how procedures for law enforcement as far as traffic stops, firearms training, mobile surveillance, communication, everything changed with this shooting. And that's what I want to get out in this video. That's what my goal is with this video series, is to get out the information, whether it's good, whether it's bad, and say, hey, this worked well, you might want to incorporate this. This did not work well, this is what you might want to do instead. We're going to start off with a positive. Now, we did lose 2 special agents and we had 5 injured. That is absolutely tragic, but we're not going to let their deaths and their injuries be in vain. We're going to learn from them. And one of the big positive takeaways that come from this is the FBI realized, even though other agents had more firepower coming, what was initially there, they were simply outgunned. They just were. And the FBI and other law enforcement agencies across the United States started using the 10mm, which is a very powerful round. But in qualifications and training scenarios, it was determined that the 10mm was so powerful, agents, even expert level shooters, were having trouble with the recoil because it's just such a massive round. So the 40 Smith & Wesson was developed out of this. And I have a 40 Smith & Wesson. That's what I keep in my personal home defense weapon. Right beside my bed is a 40 Smith & Wesson. And I didn't know where this round come from. I just thought it'd been around forever until I got into law enforcement about 14 years ago now. And my first day on the range, a topic I'll bring up later was mentioned, and then this the 40 caliber being invented out of this was also brought up. So I knew about this for a while now. I just didn't know all the information. I didn't have an avenue to express how I feel about it, and I want to get the information out. Maybe you guys didn't know that, but that's where the 40 caliber come from. The 40 Smith & Wesson was the aftermath of the 1986 Miami FBI police shooting. As you've heard before, you will fight like you train. So this little presentation here, I'm going to act like my right side has been shot, like the FBI agents. Several agents had their hands shot or their arms shot, so they had to transition over to their support hand for shooting. So it's what we're going to do with this semi-automatic. We're going to fire some rounds. The magazine's going to run out. We're going to reload another magazine and shoot the rest of our rounds out of our backup mag. Now, I'm also not carrying it out of a holster. I'm not going to drop them a holster. I'm going to pretend the fight's already going on. I got to stay in the fight. So let's do this. All right, I fired 2 rounds out of my first mag, ran out, had to get back in the fight, and I didn't want to crouch down, maybe take a chance of dropping my weapon, whatever the case was, so I stuck it in my pocket. Now, if this camera didn't pick it up, I know the GoPro side did, so got it back in the fight. And one thing I do want to say is I know on the side of most semi-automatics, that's called a slide catch, not a slide release. And I know some of you watching this are taught never to use the slide catch to rack the magazine forward. Well, if you're shot or if you're in a firefight for your life, you're going to do whatever you can to get rounds on target, get your weapon back up in the fight. So yes, I used it, and as you saw, it was effective. I got 2 rounds on, all 4 of my rounds were on target. So 4 shots, 4 rounds on target at about 12 yards. Several of the FBI agents that day were carrying a 357 Magnum as their primary and 38 Specials as their backup. So we had several FBI agents get shot in the hand or the arm area, and one thing they found during the investigation after the fact, after action review, was several agents had trouble reloading because they weren't taught on the range or in training how to reload one-handed their revolvers. So as always, we're going to pretend we're in a firefight. My right side's been injured, my right arm, my right hand, I can't use it. So I'm going to transition to my offhand. I'm going to fire some rounds, empty out my spent rounds, and I'm going to reload to get back in the fight, put some more rounds on target with what I have. So let's do this. So I had more live rounds in my pocket than what I used. I fired 3 on the reload, I had 3 more. Something that they found in their investigation after the fact was they had been taught to fully reload their chamber and then make progress instead of only putting 1 or 2 rounds in, whatever you have to do to get back in the fight. So I put in 3 rounds, felt like I was standing here for 5 minutes. So I could only imagine having rounds coming back at me and trying to reload 6, thinking that I have to have 6 before I can get back in the fight. So when you are on the range, just remember, you don't have to, not that it's not a good idea to always have a full magazine or a full cylinder, but if you're in a firefight and you can only get 2 or 3 rounds in, make those 2 or 3 rounds count. You don't have to have the mindset that you always have to have a full mag to get back in the fight. As long as you've got rounds in your weapon that's functional, you're in the fight. If you do choose to carry a revolver cylinder style weapon, whether that's in your vehicle, home defense, on your person, as a backup weapon, whatever the case is, if you choose to use it, just make sure that you know which way your cylinder turns. Now, I have a Taurus revolver. This was empty, I promise. I checked it. But the cylinder turns counterclockwise, okay? So whenever you pull the trigger or if you cock it, the cylinder is going to turn counterclockwise. Some revolver styles will turn clockwise. So if you only have, say, 3 rounds on your person, and you're in a firefight or home defense or whatever the case is, and you're having to get rounds on target, you don't want to insert 3 rounds into your cylinder and pull the trigger and get 3 clicks, thinking that your weapon, even though you know you put 3 in, you don't want 3 clicks and the bad guy to think your weapon's empty and they advance towards you or whatever the case is. Make sure that you know that whenever you pull that trigger and the hammer falls, that the rounds that you inserted are going to be turning the proper direction. That's something that's going to take time on the range. It's going to take time dry firing. Do dry firing in a safe environment. Have somebody else check your weapon and just make sure you know what's beyond. But if it's safe, but you still need just to use the universal precautions anyways. It's something that you want to get in the back of your mind. But just know which way your cylinder turns in the event it does come down to that situation. Another lesson that often gets overlooked from this case is if you're going to carry a backup weapon, whether you're law enforcement, whether it's home defense, whether it's personal defense in your vehicle or on your person, you might carry a weapon on your side and one on your ankle. You may have, when I say you, I'm referring to men. Men may wear a larger style weapon on their hip or somewhere on their person, and their wife or girlfriend, whoever, may carry a smaller style weapon in their purse. And we know purse holsters or purse concealment now is a growing thing or trend, I should say. Fashion. It's fashionable to carry a weapon nowadays with everything going on, but you don't want one person to be carrying a 357 Magnum and the other person to be carrying a 9mm like this. Case in point, Agent Dove was firing his rounds out of a 9mm semi-automatic. His hand, along with his weapon, got struck by a 223 round from one of the bad guys. And this in turn led to his death and the death of Agent Grogan, because they were back down behind cover trying to get his weapon back up in the fight, and they were more focused on the weapon, and the bad guy come around and ended their life because they were trying to get the weapon back up in the fight. And if you do carry a backup weapon, you need to train with it. And I don't mean static shooting, standing in front of a target like this. I'm talking actually train as much with your backup as you do your primary. Because as the investigation taught us, one of the agents was in preparation for the vehicle crash. He took his 357 Magnum out, put it on the front seat of his vehicle, and during the crash, his passenger side door flung open, and he lost his primary weapon. So he only had a 5-shot 38 special. He did get in the fight, but he lost at least 6 rounds, and he's lost his weapon whenever his door come open. So that was his main weapon out of the fight. So if you're gonna carry a backup weapon, you need to shoot with it and train with it as much as you do your primary weapon. Special Agent Ed Morales basically changed the way that all law enforcement agencies change their shotgun procedures or loading with a long gun. He was injured in his right arm. He got shot with a 223 immediately after the firefight began, and he wasn't able to do anything except he was the agent that was able to kill the two suspects after everything had went down. So he is credited with shooting the shotgun one-handed around some objects, and he did get rounds on target with the shotgun. He shot the first suspect in the feet. Autopsy rounds confirmed that the buckshot was from the shotgun he fired. Nobody else had a shotgun out during the fight, and he was able to get all 5 rounds of buckshot on the vehicle of the bad guys they were trying to leave. Other buckshot pellets were found, but none of them were determined to be lethal shots. So he did have the energy and he had the training to go to his primary weapon, which was 357 Magnum, made it to the vehicle where the bad guys were, and ended their life, thankfully. But the way that Officer Morales loaded the shotgun and fired the shotgun, he said he had never been taught how to do that. You'll see a demonstration here, but he had never been taught how to wrench it one-handed from a seating position. He had never been taught, never been trained, never saw that. It's something that his mind just come up with on the fly, he said. So thank God our minds are creative when we need them to be. So I'm just going to show you a little demonstration. Also going to show you a rifle magazine exchange using one hand. And as I say with any demonstration that I do, this is simply a way. It's not the only way, but it is a way. And it saved Officer Morales' life and it killed the two bad guys. So I have to think it's pretty effective. If you've been taught a different way, how to use a shotgun one-handed, if you're injured with your dominant side, that's fine. This is simply a way. So here we go. So that little course of fire there of me moving and shooting and transitioning to a backup weapon, I just come up with that on the fly just for this, give you guys an idea of what I'm talking about moving and shooting. I have done courses of fire in the past, moving and shooting and going to different weapon, reloading, all this kind of stuff, but I just come up with that just for a demonstration. Like I said, if you're going to carry a backup weapon, you need to practice with it as much as you do your primary. And anybody can stand in front of a target at 7 yards or 10 yards and shoot a pattern, you know, perfect, whether it's headshots, chest shots, whatever the case is. When you got to move, when you got to shoot, that's where you become a better shooter. It's where you become better at your tactics, and the more you do it, the better you're going to get. But get quality instruction. Don't go out and just pop off rounds. Make sure you're hitting your target. Make sure that you're getting rounds on target. That's why I use these bottles and this thing, so I can hear when I'm making contact with this and the bottles. As I knew when I hit them, I would see water run out, and that way I knew that at least I got a round on target. Like we said, shot does not equal dead or out of the fight, but at least we know we got a round on target. And if we have to conduct follow-up actions, we can. At least we know that some part of their body had been hit with a round. As you're seeing here on the screen, the suspect's weapons are listed, and then the weaponry that the FBI had is listed. Now, sadly, the agents with the fully automatic MP5 and the M16, they had stopped to use the restroom, and they did not hear the initial radio traffic of where the location was. They only heard the other agents' radio traffic of they were trying to get to them, and that is a very, very sad scenario, but it is what it is. We can't go back and change it, but we can teach and train people to improve their lines of communication. Now, we know in 1986, you didn't have cell phones, you didn't have GPS tracking, you didn't have FaceTime, you didn't have all these other communication avenues. That they only had radios in their cars, or mobile radios, handheld radios, in 1986. That was something in the after action review or the investigation that was able to come out, was the agents that conducted this stop, the 8 agents that were involved, they were able to tell the other FBI agents where they were, but they didn't have contact with Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office, Miami Police Department. So when the 911 calls started coming in of a gunfight, that's when all the other help started to arrive. But by the time the other help got there, it was too late, basically. The bad guys were dead, but we lost 2 FBI agents, and we had 5 other FBI agents injured. The old saying, when seconds count, the police are minutes away. Sometimes the police need help, and whether that's backup, whether that's civilian help, sometimes you might be outgunned, as our special agents were here with firepower. Here are some spent shell casings, and not just in this investigation, but other shootings around the country that's been involved with law enforcement and civilians, is they have found that with their training, whenever they go to like a public range or in law enforcement training, they were taught to pick up brass as soon as they emptied the rounds. They wanted all the brass off the range and put in pockets. Well, they found that FBI agents had brass in their hands and in their pockets, and they've also found other law enforcement officers, and they've also had other civilians, after whether it's an autopsy or in the hospital, they've been clinging on to brass, or they've had brass in their pockets. So when you're on the range, or you're out on your own public land or personal land, whatever the case is, let that brass be until after you are done. Pick up brass after you get done shooting. Shot does not equal dead or out of the fight, and this case proves that. Both suspects were shot multiple times. The first suspect was shot. In the autopsy, the pathologist determined he had 12 different injuries from firearm, from bullets. And the fatal shot, of course, severed his spine, or so we've been told. And another shot from Agent Dove entered, he shot him in the right arm, went through his chest cavity, stopped millimeters from his heart. In the process, of course, doing what a bullet does, it was able to nick some arteries and some other organs around his body, or around his heart. This was determined that would be a fatal round. The only problem is the suspect being I'm not going to say their names, as you know, was able to continue to fire his weapon, and he was able to move about. And in the time he was shot in this injury until he was actually killed, he was able to murder 2 FBI agents. So shot does not equal dead or out of the fight. The other suspect was determined to have 6 rounds in him, and he was immediately took out of the fight. He was shot in the neck right after the crash happened, but he still wasn't dead. He was paralyzed, but he wasn't dead. He was able to come to. He crawled out of the vehicle they had stolen, and they were trying to leave in an FBI vehicle with undercover style lights on it. So shot does not equal dead or out of the fight. So when you're training, you need to make sure that when you fire, you don't just pop some rounds off, move on to the next target. Now, of course, if you're being fired at in real life, you're going to do what you have to do. That's why shot placement is so critical. And as you have noticed with my target, it has a small area for the head. It's got a fairly narrow torso, and it's got the flapper in the back to even practice your skills that much more, knowing that you're hitting this target. So when you're at the range, you're practicing by yourself, whatever the case is, shot placement is vital. Now, you may hit somebody in a leg, you may hit somebody in the chest even. They may be on some type of drugs, they may have some type of mental disorder to where they're not out of the fight. The same thing with these gentlemen. They'd been shot multiple times, but they were technically still in the fight, firing live ammo back at agents. So shot placement is very, very, very vital. I know targets that you can get, they have the diagram of like the human body with like the organs where to aim for. Of course, we all know to aim for the head. We want headshots. We want shots in the spinal cord area, in the heart area. We want to eliminate that threat if they're coming at us, whether it's with a firearm, a knife, a club, or trying to abduction, whatever the case is. If you want to stop that threat, you need to have excellent shot placement. In those 4 minutes, over 140 rounds were fired, and there was 10 people involved, 8 special agents with the FBI and 2 suspects initially until the cavalry arrived. So that's a lot of rounds being fired by a lot of people in a very short amount of time. Nobody had a fully automatic. One of the bad guys had a Mini 14 that was a .223 caliber semi-automatic rifle, and they had a shotgun, and they had 2 different types of .357 Magnum handguns. That's what the bad guys had. The FBI had shotguns, 9mm, 38 specials, and .357 Magnums. So you got to think too, if you're in the area where a gunfight's going on, you have to expect there will be a lot of errant rounds flying in all different directions. So as soon as you hear gunfire, you need to get yourself behind some type of cover. Now, cover means you're safe from gunfire. Concealment means you're safe from their vision. They can't see you. Cover means that you're behind something where rounds should not penetrate. Concealment means you're behind something where you should not be seen. So you got to know the difference in that. Another very valuable piece of information that came out of the investigation is the FBI agents that were involved in this, they were not wearing the FBI vest that you normally see in movies or TV shows, or the bulletproof vest, as I mentioned earlier. But when the Miami-Dade police started showing up and civilians, after the gunfire had stopped, they weren't really sure who was a bad guy and who was a FBI agent, because you had 2 bad guys that were dead inside an FBI vehicle with undercover lights. Then you had all the other special agents either that were shot, or they had been murdered, or they were just out of the fight completely, and they wasn't sure who was who. Now, of course, if you check, I'm sure pockets had their credentials and their badge on them. But if you're going to be or try to intervene in a cop or a police officer being assaulted, or multiple police officers being assaulted, you need to know who's a friendly here. Is this because somebody says they're undercover police, undercover this, that, or the other, doesn't mean so. If they're laying there spread out and, oh, I'm FBI, I'm state police, I'm with the sheriff's office. If you've got a weapon on them, this is totally up to you, but you don't want to let a bad guy who just maybe murdered somebody, or attempted to murder somebody, or took a police officer or multiple police officers out of a fight or out of commission, let them up, get to their weapon, and then they take you out. They fire some rounds at you. Until you get uniformed police officers there, or you get some other people that come with badges and they're responding to the incident, you need to make sure that you are, keeping yourself safe. Whether that's getting the weapon away from the person, or I'll let you up, but I'm going to pat you down and I'm going to take your weapon first until the police get here, the real police, we determine what's going on, because you're not going to get a weapon and take me out just because I'm trying to help fallen officers. So something that you also need to think about is what we call blue on blue crime. It would have been an absolute shame for the officers that survived to be standing around holding weapons, and then people that wasn't sure who they were, whether it was a civilian defender or Miami-Dade Police Department, Sheriff's Office, show up and take them out as well. That would have been a tragedy on top of a tragedy. It was also determined of the 8 agents on the scene during the initial gunfight, only 2 were wearing any type of body armor, and that was considered a soft body armor that was rated for only pistol rounds. They were not rated for the 223 rounds that were being fired at them by one of the suspects. The other agents did have body armor in their vehicle. It was a light armor, but they all said, the ones that survived said they didn't have a chance to get the armor on. So if you do have body armor, whether you're a civilian or law enforcement, you're not going to have a chance to tell the bad guy, hey, stop shooting, let me get this vest on, or let me get this on, whatever the case is. You need to be, if you know you're going into a situation that could get sticky, you need to be ready. I know some of you are asking, Alex, why aren't you using magazine holders or pouches? Why aren't you wearing a plate carrier? Why aren't you doing all this stuff that's available to you now? Well, I'm trying to make this as true to life as possible. And you're not always going to have your tactical gear at the ready. If you're out on a, just say out driving around, you're on a date night, you're on vacation, and all you've got is one weapon or your primary and maybe a backup, you're not going to be able to go to your gear locker, put on your ballistic vest, your ballistic helmet, your knee pads, elbow pads, plate carrier, your magazine pouches, strap up with your M4 and go at it. You're going to have to go with what you have available to you. And as I mentioned, some FBI agents were wearing light body armor. 2 of the 8 were wearing light body armor that were rated for pistol rounds. The other 6 agents did have body armor in their vehicle, but they couldn't get to it in time, they said. Special Agent Ben Grogan, as I've said before, was murdered in this incident by the suspects. But the sad part about that is Special Agent Grogan was said to be one of the best shots in the entire Federal Bureau of Investigation. In interviews and investigations after the fact, people that he worked with, agents he worked with, and people that knew him just from the street said he was one of the most prepared individuals you'd ever want to meet. But when the car crash happened with the 2 suspects, his glasses flew off and he had not the best vision. So you had one of the best shots in the entire country on the scene, but his glasses were gone, and he did fire some shots and he did get some rounds on target, but he did not get fatal shots on target. Had he had his glasses, this whole situation may have gone totally different. Now, you can't expect or predict when you're going to be in a car wreck, when you're going to have to draw your weapon. The only thing I can tell you is if you are driving, if you need glasses to walk around, have a backup pair with you. Have a backup pair in your vehicle. Have a backup pair. Maybe you can go to a local retail store and get a pair pretty cheap that you can have for a backup in case you do lose them. If you do carry a semi-automatic weapon, you might want to stick an extra mag somewhere in your vehicle or in your gear bag or whatever the case is. Now, you may not have a chance to get to it in the time, but at least it's there. And like Mr. Grogan, his glasses were found to be under the brake pedal and gas pedal of the vehicle they were driving. He could not or did not know where they were. He was more focused on getting his weapon up and firing at the bad guys. So just another little tidbit there. Be prepared as possible. So you don't want to be one of the best shots in the entire nation, but if your vision isn't what it used to be. As mentioned before, Special Agent Ed Morales is credited with the fatal shots that did kill the suspects. And another part of this that often gets left out is in the 4 minutes, the 911 calls come in, and they were able, the Miami dispatch was able to get help on the scene, other law enforcement. So the FBI was there, the Miami-Dade Police Department was there, and after Morales fired the shots, there was an agent that ran up to him that knew him and said something to the effect of, "The fight's over, Ed, it's over, Ed." And he had been shot. He had just killed 2 people, 2 suspects, and he had the training, he had been taught, it was in his subconscious mind, that he secured the thumb snap for his primary weapon on his holster. He holstered his weapon, and secured the thumb snap. Now, I mean, that's a lot of mental programming to be in that type of situation, have the wherewithal to holster your weapon after you've just been shot. You've just shot other people. Put your weapon up and secure the thumb snap. That goes back to the, like I said earlier, you will fight like you train. So if you train good tactics, whether it's on the range, whether you're dry firing, whatever the case is, it will come back to you in a time of stress, in the time of being fired at or having to fire upon somebody. And another topic that was brought up after the fact in the investigation was there was no first aid kits, there was no any type of tourniquets, any type of trauma dressings for the agents, and there was no first aid rendered, whether it was taken off a shirt, whether it was any type of first aid was not given to the agents that survived by other agents until the Miami-Dade Fire and EMS and Rescue arrived and was able to get these guys to the hospital and save their life, save their limbs. So if you are going to practice with a firearm, if you're going to carry a firearm on your person or in your vehicle, in your home, you need to have a first aid kit of some type, a trauma kit of some type, just in case it does go south for you. You need to be able not only to eliminate the threat, but you also need to be able to take care of yourself or somebody with you in the event of a shooting, because you don't know who's going to be firing rounds at you. I mean, yeah, if you got your weapon up and you're firing back, but if you're driving along the road or you're out on a walk or whatever the case is, and you get caught in a crossfire or somebody wants to rob you and they get the drop on you, you get shot, somebody else gets shot, you need to be able to treat them until you can get, paramedics there, get them to a hospital. Let's put a bow on this one and wrap this one up. The 1986 FBI Miami shooting with the 2 bank robbery suspects changed the course of firearm training for law enforcement and civilians alike from then until eternity. As I mentioned, Special Agent Grogan and Special Agent Dove did lose their lives that day, but their deaths are not in vain. We have learned from that. Training is now way better than what it used to be, and training needs to evolve. Bad guys are going to evolve. Good guy training needs to evolve, and it has. So Special Agent Grogan, Special Agent Dove, this video is in your honor. Now keep in mind, I'm on a range here, my own personal property. I am going to be doing a video where I go back to the old house. You guys seem to like the house, and I'm going to be doing some of these same drills in that house using the same information that I gave you here, so be looking for that. So until then, you guys be easy, take care of yourself, take care of each other, practice safe firearm handling, the universal rules of firearm safety, as I always mention. Keep your finger off the trigger till you're ready to shoot. Treat every weapon as if it's loaded. Never point the weapon at anything you don't intend to shoot. Know what's beyond your target. Those 4 principles, rules of firearm safety, can keep you out of a lot of trouble, whether that's legal trouble, dealing with the police, or civil trouble with an errant shooting. You need to abide by those rules. Thank you for watching. We'll catch you guys on the next one.